Welcome back to Part-Time Gaming. This is a series where we analyze and rate video games from the perspective of a full-time working professional who doesn't have enough time to play all the games he loves anymore. My goal with this series is to give people with jobs and busy lives like myself reviews of games that analyze how compatible they are with our lifestyle. Today we're looking at Sea of Stars. This game took the gaming world by storm for a while, so I decided to check it out. Normally I'm not a huge fan of turn-based RPGs, but this game pleasantly surprised me with how fun it managed to be the entire game. I started it with the thought that I probably wouldn't finish the game due to the turn-based mechanics, since I tend to get a bit bored with those after a while, but that never once happened while playing, and I found myself playing all the way through to the end of the story. I enjoyed my time with it so much that I decided I wanted to make a video about this game. As a reminder, this isn't an in-depth review of the game. Instead, I'll rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 based on the following 5 criteria, all of which are being looked at through the lens of a full-time working professional. Session length, which is how long a general session needs to last to be satisfying. Game length, which is how many hours it generally takes to beat the main story of the game. Pick up and play, which is how easy the game is to pick up and start playing no matter how long it's been since you've played it. Engagement, which is how engaged your mind absolutely has to be while playing. And finally, frustration, which is how frustrating or not the moment-to-moment gameplay is. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at this gorgeous game. Alright, despite my glowing intro for Sea of Stars, we're going to start this video off on a bit of a negative with the session length category, which is about how fun, satisfying, and convenient it is to play the game in an average play session. Each play session of Sea of Stars is generally a blast. You can usually make good progress in an area, fighting multiple groups of enemies and progressing the plot forward at a reasonable pace. That being said, one of my biggest issues with this game, and basically every other game that shares this mechanic, is the way saving is handled. You can't save the game anytime you want to by just going to the start menu. Instead, you'll have to save at designated save spots, which are in the form of a book on a pedestal in this game. I really don't like when games handle saving this way. It takes control away from the player and forces you to stop and start when the game decides you're able to. If something comes up in real life and you need to stop playing quickly, but the next save point doesn't show up for a while, then you're just out of luck. You either have to leave the game running for who knows how long, or just push through until you find a save point and risk losing time for whatever it is you need to do in the real world. I hate this feeling, and it shows up a lot in RPGs. Thankfully, Sea of Stars handles this a little better than most other games with this mechanic. For the most part, there is a save point within a reasonable distance from you at any point in the game. Even if you have to backtrack for a bit to find the last one, you can do that without it breaking up your pace too much, usually. But there were a few times while playing that I found myself wishing for a save point to show up so that I could save and stop playing for one reason or another. Or even just so that I could save and not have to worry that I was going to make a mistake and get destroyed in a fight and lose a bunch of progress. It would all be much easier and much less stressful if I could just save whenever I want and not have to worry about any of this. But again, Sea of Stars managed to make the most of this mechanic so that it didn't rear its ugly head too many times. I'm giving Sea of Stars a 5 out of 10 in the session length category. Next up, we're going to discuss game length. This is how long it takes to beat the main story of the game, not including optional side quests, achievements, and things of that nature. I'm only including the standard ending in this video, and I'm not taking into account the true ending, since it is completely optional and involves a lot of extra work that I didn't feel like doing. The main story of Sea of Stars takes about 25 to 30 hours to beat, depending on how much of the optional content you complete and how competent you are at RPG combat. And I gotta say, for an RPG, that's pretty good. It's enough time to feel like you've gotten enough entertainment out of your investment in the story, but not so long as to force you to spend months and months playing the same game just to finish the story. And like I said, there is a lot of optional content outside of the main story and a true ending that you can pursue if you so choose. This adds many more hours of content to the game that is truly optional, which is always a plus. Even with the very busy last few months, I never felt like Sea of Stars was taking up too much of my time, or like I just wanted to rush to the finish because I've been playing it so long. About the time I got to the final section of the game, that's when I started feeling like I wanted this story to wrap up so I can move on to some other games I've been looking forward to playing. So I was very happy with where it ended, and I think anyone who's busy but still wants to make some time to play a great game will be happy with the length of the story. I give Sea of Stars an 8 out of 10 in the game length category. Our next category is what I call the pick up and play category. How easy is it to jump right into the game and get the hang of it so you can start enjoying it? Whether you're just starting the game, or if you're coming back to it after a long hiatus, is there a large barrier to entry in the form of learning the controls, game logic, etc. For Sea of Stars, I was pleasantly surprised with how easy it is to start playing and get a hang of the controls and combat. Quite a few RPGs can be pretty unforgiving with the number of mechanics you have to learn in order to play effectively. Even worse, they will often try to throw all these rules and mechanics at you very early and very quickly, which can overwhelm you easily. Sea of Stars takes a very gradual approach to combat. It introduces combat mechanics one at a time over a very slow pace throughout the game. This is both a positive and a little bit of a negative. In terms of this category that I'm rating it on, it's great because it allows you to easily learn and remember the mechanics of combat and battle effectively without having to struggle just remembering your moveset. It teaches you about attacks and buffs, then about attack categories and how weaknesses work, and then teaches you mechanics that you can choose to engage in or not. This is in the form of timed button presses and lock breaks that can really help you gain an edge in combat, but they aren't necessary to beat the game. This gives you room to become as skilled at the game as you want without feeling like you're falling behind or can't remember everything you need to. That can become a pretty hopeless feeling in RPGs, and if you take a break while you're in the late game and come back, it can just feel so daunting to relearn everything you'll need to continue progressing. Sea of Stars avoids this with a deceptively simple combat system that is much deeper than it appears, without forcing you to engage with the more advanced mechanics. This is perfect and, in my opinion, how every RPG should be. The only negative to this is that it takes a little too long to introduce all the combat mechanics, in my opinion. Early game combat can be pretty boring and repetitive. The game is at its most fun when you've been introduced to all the combat mechanics and can really strategize your battles. I just wish more of the game allowed this level of strategy and skill to be utilized. But again, I'm solely focusing on how easy it is to get into the game from a gameplay perspective, and in this case, it is very friendly towards players. Sea of Stars earns a 9 out of 10 in the pick up and play category from me. The next category is engagement. A lot of times after a long day, you want to be able to just relax and play a game for a while without it being a sweaty endeavor requiring all of your attention. You can't really unwind if you have to put 100% of your brain power into remembering combos and timing moves perfectly. Like I alluded to previously, Sea of Stars has attack timing mechanics where timing your attacks correctly will deal more damage or give you other positive boosts, and defending yourself from attacks on a certain beat will lower the damage you receive. However, these are completely optional and pretty forgiving in terms of how precise your button timing needs to be. This means you won't be leaning forward in your chair with an iron grip on your controller trying to get the timing perfect during battles. You just have to pay a little closer attention than you normally have to in RPGs when attacking and defending yourself. In my opinion, this just makes the game more enjoyable by giving you the option to engage with these mechanics without forcing you to always have your mind laser focused on the combat. Additionally, while the combat has more depth than meets the eye, the underlying mechanics of the game, such as status effects, buffs, debuffs, type advantages, etc., don't go too deep. Some people consider this a negative of the game, and that is a perfectly valid opinion to have, but in the case of the level of engagement the game requires of you, this is a positive. It keeps you on your toes without requiring you to devote your gaming sessions to learning and remembering a book's worth of game mechanics. This isn't a game you can play while half asleep by any means. It is an RPG after all, and that comes with a certain level of mental stamina required to fully enjoy, but it's certainly a game you can unwind with after a long day. I'm giving Sea of Stars a 7 out of 10 in the engagement category. We've come to our final category, frustration. This is pretty much the last emotion I want to feel when trying to relax after work. If I start feeling frustrated a lot, I'm pretty much guaranteed to drop a game. I'm happy to say that I almost didn't feel frustrated while playing Sea of Stars at all. Pretty much every night after work I looked forward to playing and seeing where the story went, and I actually got excited about each combat encounter. Many times when playing turn-based RPGs, I start to dread enemy encounters and become more and more frustrated with each one, especially in RPGs with random encounters, which Sea of Stars thankfully doesn't have. But with Sea of Stars, each combat encounter became more and more fun and engaging as the combat systems became more open and gave more variety and options for strategizing. And each fight felt like a fair assessment of my abilities and a test of how much I'd learned, instead of just feeling like a gauntlet put in front of me to pad out the time spent in the game. It's just such a fun system, and it never feels like it's cheating to create artificial difficulty. It respects the player, and because of that, I respect it. The only times where I felt some frustration were in a few of the boss battles. Many boss battles feature mechanics where there are other entities that you can attack, and which can attack you in turn, or cause other effects during the battle. For example, a boss may have tentacles that come out, or one boss generates these items that all have different effects, such as dealing damage to the player or healing the boss. Many times when a boss had this type of mechanic, I felt that the extra entities would regenerate too quickly after you take the time to defeat them. It was annoying to take 3 turns to get rid of some enemies the boss had just spawned just to get 1 turn to actually attack the boss before it spawned in another wave of enemies to attack you. This padded out some boss battles to last longer than I thought they should, to the point where by the end of the fight, it just didn't seem interesting and just felt more annoying than anything. The good news is that these battles were few and far between, and even though they caused some frustration, they never felt overly difficult or like too big of an obstacle to stop me from wanting to play the game. I just had to push through them during the moment to get back to the much better core gameplay, where the frustration of the battle was quickly forgotten. Sea of Stars gets a 6 out of 10 in the frustration category. In case it isn't clear, I really enjoyed my time with Sea of Stars. In a time when I'm working hard during the day and doing grad school at night, it takes a special kind of game to be worth occupying my very limited time with. Sea of Stars turned out to be the perfect game to spend a couple months playing. The incredibly satisfying gameplay, the great world building and pixel art, and the relaxing vibes made for an incredible experience. I'm glad I gave it a chance despite my initial misgivings. Sea of Stars will occupy a special place in my heart for a long time, and if you're looking for a game to lose yourself in for a little while, I'd highly recommend it. This has been Part-Time Gaming. Thank you, and God bless.